Ben Clancy excelled on the football field in high school. He loved jazz guitar and was the kind of guy who could entertain a crowd. His parents were thrilled when he was accepted to a small liberal arts school in upstate New York to major in public policy. He graduated in 2015.
He had a really big heart. He was always kind to everyone when he felt like they weren't getting a fair shake. And he was going to go work for a company that was doing some environmental work for companies in big buildings and that sort of thing. He was really looking forward to it.
That was the plan until
he and his friends had a party and they did a lot of drugs. And he stopped breathing and his heart stopped beating. And they figured out eventually to call an ambulance, and the EMTs were able to come and revive him and bring him to Mass General. And he was unconscious when we got there.
Ben's heart had stopped. It had been restarted. They were cooling his body down to mitigate damage to his brain, and he had a ventilator.
Andrea and Brian Clancy heard the doctor's short-term plan for Ben. They would stop medications and re-warm him. They waited anxiously.
And initially, their only hope, the only thing they could think was, please, to let their son live.
How's it breathing?
I saw a lot of patients in the long-term acute care hospital where I do some work. Increasingly, they were young people who had had an opiate overdose and had been resuscitated, but were not okay. And I was really interested by this question about brain injury, where it takes a while for us to know what it can look like.
After 4 weeks in Mass General and then 8 weeks at Spaulding Rehab in Charlestown, Ben Clancy would finally go home.
By the time I met them, it was different. It was all right. He's alive. We're no longer afraid every moment that he will die. I think at least there was a question of, will he end up being able to live independently? Will he end up having friends that he can talk to?
Shortly after Ben got home, he was out on the golf course. He was walking and talking.
He wasn't, I wouldn't say very vocal, because if you knew Ben before, he was very vocal. But he could answer questions, even if they were simple. He could make statements. He could tell you what he wanted.
Then, a setback.
He did end up with pneumonia about October of 2016. Since then, he really never quite got back to where he was before that. Yes or no? Now we're lucky if we get a sentence in a day. We're kind of behind where we were when Daniela met him to write her chapter in the book.
He was living back at home, but he wasn't the same. He was quiet, wasn't certain how well he would even be able to walk or do the daily activities of living an independent life. And, some of the questions that I wanted to know were sort of, how was his mother able to navigate that?
Good job.
Not knowing how close he could get to the Ben that he was, did that question paralyze her? And the answer was no. She did the things that she had to do each day and tried to find meaning in who her son was at that moment, while also holding on to the hope that things would get better.
For the Clancys, it's yet another new normal.
We have to help him really with every part of daily living. We have a lot of doctor's appointments and a lot of therapy, physical therapy and speech therapy and occupational therapy, and he's working with therapists to come up with a new program to communicate with us because he's really not very verbal.
And so his life is much different than the life he was going to have, but his mother and his family continue to work to give him things that he enjoys and to help him find meaning in what he can.
Ben's family used to call him the Sandwich Man because he liked to make and eat sandwiches day and night. His mother was thrilled when she heard.
The other day we were playing around with the iPad and I was in the other room and he typed in sandwich time, which just made me laugh because we always called him Sandwich Man. So that was an initiation that we haven't seen in a really long time. So that's very exciting, good progress. Did he do it the next day? No. But once we'll take it. He could do it tomorrow, right?
And of course, the Clancys are so happy to have Ben home.
They are, and they're hoping to get him back to the point where he was when he first left Spalding. Dr. Lamas talks a lot about the challenges that face families when a person with a brain injury comes home. It can be very, very difficult. The Clancys are saying they just want to get back to the point where the sandwich man can make a sandwich again.
All right. A doctor's question: when does modern medicine reach its limit?
What we do to and for people with the goal of getting them back to their lives is often in and of itself a trauma.